This is a plaque devoted to Philo Farnsworth, Grandma said. She was closest to it. Who was he? Lee Babe said. He happens to be one of the most famous men in the world, she said. Never heard of him, Lee Babe said. Famous for what? I said. Can't you read? Grandpa Hirsch said. Can, but don't want to. Well, Grandma Leona said, he invented something you use every day. Tennis shoes, I said. Spaghetti, Lee Babe said. Grandma Larson shook her head. Try something you turn on and watch, said Grandpa Hirsch. Something that rots your brain. TV! Lee Babes and I yelled together, as if we had just chosen correctly, and Monty Hall from Let's Make a Deal was showing us the new motorboat behind door number 3. How come I never heard of him? I said. Because no one ever told you, he said. Your mom and dad should have. It's a sad story. See, he invented television in his barn, not far from here either. Took it to New York, but CBS, or maybe it was ABC, stole the idea. He didn't get one penny. His whole life went to rack and ruin after that. Still, he showed them bigwigs what an Idaho boy can do. The day after that, or maybe it was the 4th day, Grandpa took me out alone. What began as a mystery trip with just 2 of us turned into a conspiracy of left turns that left us in front of a little old-timey building with one of those cylinders out in front, striped red, white, and blue. Here we are, he said. Is it a candy store? Not exactly. By now I could see inside. A barber shop. I ain't going in there, I said. Grandpa Hirsch put his hand on my shoulder, not to comfort, but to prevent possible flight. Your hair is too long, he said. I'm doing you a favor. I ain't getting no haircut. No grandson of mine is going around looking like a girl. I don't look like one. He didn't say anything. His silence made me think of the summer before when I'd gone roller skating at Locata Lodge near Bear Lake. Just me and my sister Chris, who was in 9th grade. One of the other skaters, shy and very cute, probably a 5th or 6th grader, motioned Chris over and whispered something, then pointed at me. What did she say? I asked. What did she say? I badgered Chris the whole night till she finally blurted it out. She wanted to know whether you were a boy or a girl. She couldn't tell for sure. I hated that girl. I hated my sister, and I especially hated my hair. But that didn't mean I wanted to cut it. Neither back at the skating rink or here with Grandpa Hirsch. Maybe I just needed a few years to grow into it. Through the barbershop window I could see old-timey chairs and an ancient, grizzled-looking guy, mean as a dentist, sitting in the closest one, the executioner in his own electric chair. Grandpa Hirsch took my arm and led me inside. Barberman folded up his paper and stood up. Morning, Grandpa Hirsch said. Morning, Hirsch, Barberman said. What can we do for you? I'm okay for a few more weeks, but the young man, he could use a trim. Indeed, Barberman said. And how much should we take off? All of it, he said. No, I said. A crew cut then. Yes, a crew cut. No, I said louder this time. No, no, no. Can do, Barberman said. Let's see what kind of boy we have under all that hair. I didn't move. Grandpa Hirsch put pressure on my shoulder. I could kick and bite and scream, but that would make me look like the girl I hoped I wasn't. It was one thing to tantrum in private, quite another to do so in public, with farmer guys old as Methuselah threatening to walk in any minute. I fought back by not moving. More pressure on my shoulder. I turned myself into a car that is out of gas and has to be pushed to the side of the road. The not-so-gentle hands of Grandpa Urschel steered and corrected, then plucked me down in the chair. Barberman put a paper collar on me, then a cape, then foot-pedaled the seat till I was as tall as a tree. He clicked on the electric shears and started in, and the curls, which I suddenly loved more than anything I owned, fell away in waves. There was more than one way to hate someone in this world. To keep from crying, I sent my eyes around the room, but vowed never to speak to Grandpa Hirsch again. On the glass shelf to my right, combs and brushes and bottles of ointment lined up like poisons. Below sat a Coke machine, the old horizontal kind with a lid that slides back and inside you feel bottles hanging from their necks like executed criminals. The coffee table was littered with copies of Field and Stream and Outdoor Life, and I understood the rituals one must pass through in becoming a man. pull a monster lake trout from a bottomless reservoir, shoot a 5-point buck, survive a grizzly attack in Montana by playing dead. Now I had one to add to the list. Crawl out of the barbershop, minus your scalp. Without tears, of course. I forced myself to cry on the inside only, secret hot tears of hate. They dripped like melting icicles. I was my hair. I was my curls. And now I was no more than prickles. The shop I preferred was not a barber shop at all, but a hair salon back in Pocatello called House of Man. I'd only been there once. No barbers, only stylists, both men and women. And the women had curves to them and only sometimes wore bras. And the men looked like Dustin Hoffman, only more femmy, and wore wide-collared shirts bright as a peacock. They'd bring you a soda, your choice, and bring it to you for free, even Coke or Dr. Pepper. And the floor had carpet on it, not tile. And the music wasn't country, but the Beatles and Donovan and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And they asked you not about fishing, but about your girlfriends and what made you feel like the handsomest, long-haired kid in the world. And some of the men got permanent so their hair could learn the tricks that mine performed all on its own. And when you left, your hair was still long and dry and natural, not buzzed off or gooped into spikes. When the barber put away his clippers, I had a buzz cut. He held up a mirror, but I refused to look. Outside, I caught a glimpse of the glare of the front window. A geeky farm-looking kid, face pulled up with a half an hour of not crying. What was worse, I could see the bump on my head I'd received 3 weeks before at Pee Wee baseball when my friend knocked me over the head with a Louisville Slugger, a bump that never went away. Not only was I prickly like a cactus, but lopsided like a cantaloupe no one wants to buy. "Now you look like a boy," he said. "Isn't that better?" I said nothing, but saved my tears till I was safely in the back seat of the Ford Falcon. I lay down and walked, rubbing at my head the whole time. If I had been Samson, shorn of my locks but with one more burst of superhero power buried inside, I'd have shredded that car. I would have torn off the doors and tossed them through business windows we passed. I'd have sent Grandpa Hirsch flying and crashed the car into the river and not even cared if I died in the process, maybe impaled on the steeple of the nearest church. "Look, I'm just doing what's best for you," he said. "I'm sorry your parents don't have enough sense to keep their son barbered up. If you stop blubbering, maybe I'll take you to the zoo." I don't know whether Grandpa Urschel had planned the outing in advance or was just trying to win me back, but within a few hours we were entering Tutphos Park Zoo. If Lee Babes joined us, I've blanked her out completely. Easy to do with a dumb 5-year-old. No, just me and my grandpa, Mr. Torture Man. I still refused to talk to him. I concentrated on the animals instead. Bickering monkeys, sea otters turning figure eights in their glass auditorium, a baby goat using its mother as a stepladder to beg popcorn. Finally, I parked myself in front of the gorilla cage. I hugged the bars and stared at this giant creature. Strange, he wasn't shaking the bars or trying to climb out of his cage. He was sad, like me, sad and rubbing something he held in his hand. I looked closer. A half-dead robin. A crowd of people gathered to watch. Here he was, bigger than a fullback, blacker than car tires, but as quiet as an old guy at a funeral mourning his dead cousin. The gorilla cupped his long fingers as if holding water, and with his other hand stroked the bird. Hard to know whether the robin was still alive. Every so often I could see a wing flutter, but that might have been in the wind. No one knew for sure what had happened, but I listened in on their theories. Some said the robin was sick. Some said it was injured and flew into the cage by mistake and couldn't get out. Some said the gorilla knocked it from the air out of pure meanness, stunning it, then tore off its wing and was about to eat the bird alive, then felt sorry. I like this last story best. I could almost make out droplets on the wing. Blood? The cage was split in two, an inside part and an outside part, with a passage between. When too many people gathered, the gorilla looked up at us, then swung his heavy body away and disappeared. Some kids followed him inside, running to get a better look. I was one of those kids, but the only one who understood the gorilla. All my practice looking for pigs and jackalopes I now spent on the gorilla. I kept rubbing at that oversized bump that didn't belong in my head, and the gorilla kept rubbing what didn't belong in his hand, a half-dead rat robin. The bristles made it seem like I had an animal grafted onto my skull. The robin made it seem that the gorilla had a secret to keep. After a while, the gorilla went back inside, and I ran ahead of everyone to join him. Maybe I'd grow up and be a zookeeper. Scratch that. Maybe I'd travel the country, freeing gorillas from cages. My grandfather was somewhere behind me. I looked around till I saw him. Then he sat on a bench, reading his damn newspaper and smoking like a chimney. Like the cigarette was in charge, making the fingers do what it wanted, the fingers bossing the arm bossing the rest of the body. The cigarette was smoking the man. Take away that red glow and he would disappear. But the gorilla, he was real, and I was real. I was talking to him by rubbing the bristles on my head, and he was talking to me by stroking the bird, and both of us kept crying on the inside. I said my name, Lance, 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 and rubbed my head, and after a while I disappeared as well, but in a good way. I was not a boy who answered to that name any more. I was a gorilla, a robin, a pair of sleeping pigs, the jackalope I never saw, the magic grass that could climb your arm. I looked up. I was the tree above and the leaves fluttering, and I was also the breeze fingering its way past my ears, which were naked and sticking out. People were talking all around me, and a fat little girl was eating cotton candy. If there's a boy underneath all that hair, we better find him. Why is there no place for a gorilla trying to float a bird to another world? I could see a robin feather inside the cage. I got a stick and reached it through the chain link and drew it closer till I could grab it. Are you a boy or a girl? I had prickles on my head and a bump that would never go away. When it was time to leave, my grandpa took me by his cigarette hand, and we walked past all the caged animals into the parking lot, and he unlocked my door and made me drop the feather, which is probably diseased, he said. And I sat in the back seat and started to cry again, but for something different, something larger and far away, and I rubbed my head to take me there.